So I'm back. And I did just do a video about the elements, and this video is about projections. And how projections work within a natal chart within astrology. So we have 12 signs, correct? And typically, the way our minds are formed when we're children is that when we come into the world, we are fully absorbent. This is the first house. This is the ascendant. So whatever is in your first house, the minute that you take breath, the minute that you inhale, that's your ascendant. Okay. So from the first house to the sixth house, we are soaking up a lot. We are soaking up with the first house, our personal connections, our body, learning that we have a body. This is why babies are really curious and just moving around and just soaking in everything. And then we go through so forth from the second to the third, and we're like sponges, okay? So this part of the egoic development of the personality is what we can personally identify within ourselves, what we accept, what we are more so aware of. Houses 1 through 5. House 6 is when the work begins. House 7 is the projection. This is the projection. This is when we take our developed sense of self and we begin to project it outward. This is Libra. This is the 7th house. This is the sign of an air element, the 7th house, and Libra, the sign of balance. The going out and seeking a balance. However, here's the problem with projections. If you've been raised up, and typically in the natal chart, we see this as oppositions and squares, to where the perception is a bit distorted. Particularly if you have Pisces in houses 1 through 6, if you have Libra houses 1 through 6, if you have, like for instance, if you're a Libra ascendant, your projections, that's going to be a distortion. If you have a lot of squares from your houses 1 through 6, there's going to be some distortion, and especially opposition. So let's say, like for instance, me, I have my Mars conjuncts my ascendant, and it is opposite my moon. My moon is in Cancer, conjunct my descendant, and my Mars is in Capricorn, conjunct my ascendant. That is a distortion. Now, granted, Mars does well in the first house, so the conflict that I will be getting into will typically deal with issues to where things could be worked out in Mars's best interest. That's basically what a planetary dignity means. It means that that planet can go out, even though there's squares, harsh situations and experiences, oppositions where you're facing oppositions until you get your projections right. I'm going to get to that. It means that that planet is capable of achieving what's necessary for that planet. My moon is in Cancer, so that means that the moon has dignity in Cancer. So when the moon does go out and is facing these oppositional circumstances, until the awareness is gained, which typically happens throughout life, we mature. We begin to see patterns in our experiences. And if we are wise, we can then begin to do the 6th house work. And that's the every single day work that we do in order to gain mastery over our projections. So I'm going to get into projections. So often the things that we lack, we seek that out in others. So when we're dealing with projections, we're dealing with the shadow. And all over the internet right now, shadow work, especially amongst the millennial generation, shadow work is really big. And this is the Pluto and Scorpio generation, the millennials. I'm a millennial myself. Shadow work is just a thing now. It's becoming very popular, and that's great. So when we're dealing with the 7th house, this is when we first begin to realize that, okay, so it's not all about me. I have to go outside of myself. And in order to go outside of myself, there's some relating that has to take place. If I feel like I'm in a situation or a circumstance which is basic survival, I'm going to project what I lack into another. Typically, this is formulated through our partnerships. So I'm going to project into, which is typically the seventh house. And through these projections, this is when the real work, spirituality, is being taken. And this is when you begin to create a spiritual practice. Because life is about learning. It's called the university. And we are, as being spiritually responsible, we're responsible for our projections. We are responsible for the shadows that we project onto others due to expectations and the responsibility that we fail to take on our own. And instead of us taking on the responsibility, we will project onto others, and we will build expectations, and we will expect an individual to fulfill something within us. And it gets dangerous because we all have free will. We all have free will. And it's dangerous to come out here using manipulating tactics to uphold your projections, especially when a person doesn't line up with that. And that's it can become very dark because no one owes us anything. Listen, we are privileged to have people that chooses to be in relationship with us. That means that we're relating. However, when we become aware of a projection and we fail to take responsibility, this is the downfall of that relationship. Because no one wants to be your projection. We're all projecting, but all I'm saying is that once certain transits come and shed light on certain shadows and we refuse to take responsibility, that is when we start getting Plutonian issues of possessiveness, and when we start jealousy and the deeper emotions that when they come up, we're not dealing with them and we're not being honest, not to that person, trying to get that person when they step outside of that projection and they're expressing who they truly are, or they're expressing something different. No, we need to go look not at that person, in the mirror. Because when we look in the mirror, we can begin to reflect. And this is powerful. The more reflecting we can do in the mirror versus projecting onto our relationships, we gain our power back. And this creates a situation to where we can properly manifest those in our lives that are in alignment. And this is evolution. This is getting out of the lower self, where you're basically projecting and you're casting shadows everywhere, and choosing to do the work into, which I like to say, the center. I like to remain centered as much as possible. However, we're on the ladder going up and down, up and down, up and down. So of course, there will be a flow, but I like to do my best to remain in my center, to operate from my center. That is the equilibrium. That's Leo, the heart. Cancer, the heart, that area. The solar plexus area. But yeah, so the projections, we do them, but a part of people don't really understand that taking spiritual accountability and spirituality is about creating a practice to where we are routinely self-reflecting. So we become aware of the projection, and then we begin to reflect on these things. And there are many different ways to begin systems of self-reflecting, but it's good to know your natal alignment, because this is where we have the tools to know what the projections are, potentially the self-reflecting. And it just helps us. It helps us, and it especially helps us get out of the old. Well, I'm not just going to say old, but a lot of the therapy where we blaming. A lot of therapy, I feel, is about blaming. So astrology takes us out of just the ever-ending cycle of blaming. And it allows us to look within at our higher natures, as above, so below, as within, so without. And we can begin to do the spiritual work. That's what spirituality is. A lot of people don't realize that. When you get out of religion and you start adopting the spirituality, and spirituality is self-work. It is individuality, taking accountability for the individual and how the individual goes out and relates the individuality outward. And being able to do that in the most productive way, because love produces, and a lot of love produces, and the key is to produce abundance. Talk to y'all later.